I had no appreciation for all of the amazing places we would go due to the generosity and flexibility of his position at Penn State. From Belgium to Israel to Australia, we traveled around the world, seeing new places, meeting new people, and most importantly, making long-lasting friendships and connections, not just for him, but for me and my mom and my husband, and ultimately even my children. So Dad traveled so much that when Glenn and I got married, we had to check to make sure that he would be in the country before we chose a date. Now, as it happened, lo and behold, the big marketing science conference was, and Dad had to correct me on the exact place, was scheduled for Syracuse, New York, the year we wanted to get married. Huzzah! So the date was set, and along with the expected friends and family, we had friends and colleagues from around the world who arrived to celebrate the big event with us. I will never forget the very, very long receiving line, at which we got to a certain point where I just said to Glenn, "It's just another one of my dad's colleagues, just shake his hand." Then, when I got pregnant with our oldest, Ashen, and my mom decided that she wanted to not be a long-distance mom and grandma, so she got an apartment in Stanford to be nearby, my dad soon found enough flexibility in his schedule due to the autonomy Penn State had always afforded him to spend more and more time in Stanford, even buying a condo right before our second child, Callie, was born. And I can tell you that both Ashen and Callie would have the same response I did if faced with that poor, scared young student's question, who, him? The goofer-arounder, as they call him? In short, all of you have heard about all of the wonderful things my dad has done in his career over the years, from starting the ISBM, to publishing so very many papers, to mentoring so many younger students and colleagues, to having an award named after him. But I'm here to tell you that being at Penn State has offered him the opportunity to do all of the things he loves best in his work, and to fill his need to constantly learn new things and expand his knowledge, because we all know that if he doesn't have enough to do with his brain, things get to be a little troublesome. In fact, he loves it so much, we were all shocked when he announced he was actually going to retire. My best friend was like, "Wait, he's actually retiring, are you sure?" In fact, years ago, she said to me, "He's going to be one of those emeritus professors who wanders around and nobody knows why he's still there, but he's still there. So don't worry, he'll still be around." So thank you to everyone who is here, for all of you who helped make this amazing journey of his possible. And here's to you, Dad, on this auspicious day. But anyone who thinks that retirement means sitting with his feet up, rest assured that if you look at his travel schedule since the end of April, sitting quietly at home and relaxing is certainly not in the cards. Thank you.
Okay, now for our guest of honor. It's my pleasure to be introducing friend, mentor, and someone who has found, like my wife, the strength and patience to put up with me for quite a few years. My pleasure to introduce Dr. Gary Lilien.
I was introduced earlier, so I don't think I need a second one of these. This is a hard act to follow. And after remarks like these, you'd think that I have nothing to say or to add. Well, if you thought that, you're wrong. Okay? And also, I think if you listen, when I'm listening there, you think that the person who's being described there really has some clear plans for his or her career. Well, if you did that, you're also wrong. Because if you think about it, the expression goes, people plan and God laughs. I think a more technical version of that comes from Mike Tyson, which says, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So I think of my career, I'm going to do a little bit of retrospect. Listen, I got you guys here, you're locked in. You're not getting out of here until I'm done, okay? So I may go off a little bit. But what I wanted to sort of reflect on, because I was reflecting on my career, I think think that's what this is about. And again, the idea is there a plan here? And I really don't think there was. I think it was more serendipity, but also how does serendipity interact with whatever your interests are, etc. So I'm going to share some experiences from my career and then see how that may fit into some principles that maybe some thoughts that I can leave with you. And I tried not to make this too long, but maybe we'll have a couple laughs as well. Anyway, I studied to be an engineer, okay? And I went to Columbia. I was in engineering school. I was in a master's program, and planned to go to a PhD. It was 1968. Now, that was the beginning of the uprisings on campus, the Vietnam War, etc. So when I'm looking at what's going on at Columbia now, that was what it was like when I was there in 1968. Now, the 1968, I was planning to continue. I was finishing my master's program, planning to go into a PhD program. I had a low draft number, so I was I was draft bait at that point. But in any case, I just accepted an offer for a job, a summer job at Mobile Corporation in the operations and corporate OR department. And during that job interview, I learned that everybody in that department had a draft department. God knows why. But Mobile had a smarter set of lawyers than the government did. So they got everybody there draft department. So I asked them, they gave me a summer job. I said, what about if you hire me full time? They said, terrific. I agreed, so I avoided the draft. I was 21 at the time. I avoided the draft, and I worked at Mobile for 5 years. So I didn't look for a job at Mobile. That was a summer job, for God's sake. My father knew somebody there, and I got this job over there. And it happened to be an OR, so I had some, the credentials. So I'm in Mobile, all right? Well, Mobile OR department was almost a little bit like Bell Labs at Mobile. There were about 25 people in the corporate OR department, half of whom had PhDs, almost all of them went on to academic careers. My supervisor, again, serendipity, was Ambar Rao. How many of you folks know, okay, good, the older people here know Ambar. Ambar, he's retired a few years ago from St. Louis. Anyways, he was my supervisor. My group manager, Rudy Reinitz, had his doctorate from John Little. Okay, the Little Award, most of you know that. John was a consultant for our group. He would come in, we would make little presentations, and he would give comments on it. I didn't know who the hell he was, but he made really smart comments. And so one of my projects at Mobile involved working with the marketing research department to understand how brand choice interacts with pricing to drive choice behavior. And it involved analyzing diary panel data the department was collecting. So I looked at this, and I had a couple of other possible projects. I figured, why don't I get a project in Mobile and turn that into a dissertation? And there was some other stuff that was not at all related to marketing, because we did work in other areas. This one, in any case, I thought the data and the model that I had in mind could be the basis of the dissertation. Now, I'm like 24 years old at this point, and there was no way in the engineering school we knew anything about stuff like this. But, because it was in the area of stochastic models of buyer behavior. However, one of the world's experts in this area, I found out when I did a little literature review, was a fellow named Don Morrison, but he was in the business school. Anyway, I invited Don to lunch. I gave him like a 2-page outline of what I planned to do, and asked if he'd act as my dissertation advisor. This is a little different than I think most of the folks that you've gone through with your dissertation process. So Don looked at it, and we chatted a little bit. And, if you speak to Don, though, he'll tell you, I didn't ask him, I told him that he was going to be my dissertation. But anyway, that's what parents and children have to do. Anyway, I asked him, that's my version, I asked him whether he would be my dissertation advisor, and he agreed. So I was Don's second PhD student, and to this day I call him Dad. He calls me second son. Anyway, I defended my dissertation about 8 months later, and I think I met with Don perhaps a half a dozen times between then. Now, let's pull back for a second. This sounds odd, doesn't it? Now, I was working full time. I didn't know what a PhD program was about. I figured I worked out with the idea with an advisor is you come in with something and they give you advice. So So I figured an hour of his time every few months was plenty. In any case, I defended my dissertation about 8 months later. And then the other thing was that I hit the age of 26. Now, those of you who are old enough knew that once you hit 26, you're no longer draft eligible. Okay, so I realized I skipped the Vietnam, I was draft eligible. I skipped the Vietnam War, but now I could determine whether I wanted to either stay in Mobile, having a good job there, or maybe try out academia. So in any case, I asked Don whether or not what he thought, and he said, I think you'd be successful in academia. He said, so why don't we pick out a few engineering schools? I was in the OR department. I was in an engineering school. So he said, what engineering school do you think would be good for me? He said, what you're doing is probably better in a business school. So, and he said, there are only a couple of business schools. In fact, he said, there are only 2 schools that would be appropriate for you. And he contacted these 2. I went on interviews, and one of them was MIT, and I got an offer from there. And maybe that had to do with the fact that John Little happened to be a dissertation advisor for the guy who ran my group at Mobile. I wasn't thinking even of going into the business area, etc. So anyway, I get a job as an assistant professor in the marketing area, of course, at the Sloan School. And my father ran a print shop. He was a smart man, but back at that time, he ran a print shop. He was a very practical man. So I told him that I was leaving my job at Mobile, and I was going to take this position at the Sloan School at MIT. So my father said to me, he said, Sloan School at MIT, that's a business school, isn't it? I said, yes. He said, weren't you going to an engineering school? So I said, yes. So what are you going to do there? I said, well, I'm going to do research and I'm going to teach. He said, what are you going to teach? So I said, marketing. He said, marketing. Have you ever taken a marketing course? I said, no. Do you have any training in teaching? I said, no. He said, marketing, teaching, marketing, that must be a field with very low barriers to entry. Anyway, see, here we are. So I was there, think about this. So now I have this job at MIT. I'm 26 years old. I was not there because I had any plans. I was there because of the Vietnam War, the draft, my working in a project in marketing, because I worked in a project in drilling and management and personnel planning and a lot of other areas. And it turns out that the one that happened to turn into my dissertation was in marketing. My connection with the dissertation advisor at my university, and of course, Don Morrison knew John Little very well. So there I was. So that's how my career got started. Anyway, so I'm at MIT. I had an office next to John Little. I mean, those of you, think about, I didn't realize how privileged I was to spend 8 years in the office next to John Little. So anyway, so while I was at Mobile, interesting problems emerged. People used to come to my office at Mobile, with interesting problems. Problems so hard to solve because we were the corporate group. There were divisional groups, and they would go to the corporate department if they couldn't really deal with it. And in fact, by the time I was at MIT for a couple of years, I actually had 6 A-level publications coming from the work that emerged from people coming to my office. So I'm sitting in my office at MIT, la la la, la la la. I'm waiting for people to come in with interesting problems. Well, they didn't. So anyway, so John stopped by my office one day, and he asked how things were going. And I said, well, not bad, but nobody's coming into my office with interesting problems. What am I supposed to do? So John said, you silly boy. He said, you're in academia now. You have to make up the problems. So anyway, I translated that, and I said, ask him to explain a little bit more. So he said, I had to find problems on my own. And I asked him how I'm supposed to do that. So he said, well, ask important questions that other people are not asking, okay? And my advice to you is interact with practitioners, because that's where you'll find real problems. And one of the things that I loved about MIT was that it was not focused on abstract problems. The folks there were all looking for better ways to solving real problems. So, serendipity number 2. So I followed John's advice. I scanned the field and I noticed that almost all the academic work in marketing, including my dissertation, was in B2C. And basically, from what I could see, B2B was pretty much ignored. So I decided that I'd, given my background in engineering in particular, like Ralph and like Irv, I'd allocate a significant portion of my time to looking into the B2B domain. And the rest of my time would go into the area where I was really well trained, which is in OR, but particularly OR applied to marketing. Anyway, so in the late 70s, I was teaching a PhD seminar on marketing models at MIT. Our text, which was Marketing Decision Making, a Model Building Approach by Phil Kotler, had some real pluses, and I was using it in the course. But Phil, who actually was trained as an economist at MIT, took a really economics view of the field, and I had some difficulties with that, so I used the book a little bit in the background, but I used a lot of my old material, and I said, maybe there could be a second book in this field that was more applying OR into marketing. Anyway, serendipity number 3. I get a call one day from Phil Kotler, who incidentally got a doctorate from MIT, and who, guess what, he knew John Little, etc., etc. And anyway, after pleasantries, he told me he felt that, as I did, that his 71 text was out of date, and asked if I'd take the lead on a major revision. Work that he didn't have time for, and he really wasn't up to date on what was going on in the field at the time anyway. Now imagine this, you're just about 30, and Phil Kotler calls you and asks you to be a co-author on the leading models text in the field. So I said, what a terrific opportunity. And he said he was not going to have time to do too much, and invited me in. And I said, of course, terrific. Worked hard. And in fact, Phil was correct. He didn't have much time for this, which was really great because it didn't bother me about what I wanted to do in terms of the revision. It really turned it around. And so the book was about to go to press. Phil called and he said that considering my contributions to the revision, that Lilien and Kotler would be a more appropriate order of authorship than Kotler and Lilien. Now think about this for a second. That Phil could, I would have been delighted. I was delighted to have this book having been Kotler and Lilien. Okay? But Phil, with grace, suggested the reverse. It wasn't going to hurt his career, but the difference between Lilien and Kotler and Lilien made a major difference, certainly for my career. And we heard a little bit yesterday about the impact of this book. In particular, I know several of you have indicated that this book was a major hurdle that had to be crossed in order for you to get your doctorate, and Neely pointed that out as well, that she had to fight the barrier of getting through this book. In any case, reflecting on grace and generosity, I was stunned and enormously grateful to Phil for doing this. And that's one of the kinds of things that I want to try to pass on as something that you can do, the things you can do to help others that don't cost you that much. Not a bad thing to do. So this is gave my career a huge boost, but again, the whole thing was really serendipity. Anyway, so as an associate prof at MIT in 1980, I got a call from Paul Rigby, who was associate dean here at Penn State. And he said that I had been recommended for a unique position, which is research professor of management science. I'm from New York, okay? In New York they have this expression, why are people always in New York look so grim? Because the light at the end of the tunnel is New Jersey. You don't go there. Okay, so now you got to go through New Jersey to get to Pennsylvania, so you give you some idea about how often I come here. So anyway, I have no idea where this thing was, and I was recommended again for this position, and I was asked to think about what I would do if I had a position that really did not have the kind of structure that most academic positions have, which is a formal teaching load and this and that. Teaching load would be flexible. I'd have my own administrative assistant and separate research fund, etc. And I could teach what I wanted when I wanted. So I told her as a search committee that really I had two interests. One was in the B2B domain, and the other was in the application, implementation of marketing models. Apparently they thought that was not a bad thing to do. So I got the position, and as most of you were here yesterday, so you heard the whole story about the evolution of the ISP. I'm not going to repeat that here. And things worked out really, really quite well. So if you will, sort of serendipity number 4, I was offered and accepted the Penn State position, and I'm still here. Serendipity was that Dave happened to be here, and Irv couldn't find, where's Irv? Oh, there you go. Irv couldn't find any better place to get this thing started, so we got it started here. And, you know, if it weren't for the actors at that time, this wouldn't have happened. You know, SBM wouldn't have happened. The whole situation wouldn't have happened. Arvin talked a little bit on the marketing analytics side, but again, think about that. I was interested in the challenge. By the way, after I wrote this marketing models book, I said, this is terrific. I got all the marketing models in one place, and I tried to teach it not to doctoral students. It was a dumb idea. And I said, they need something, they can't read these mathematical symbols and stuff like that. They need something more to do it. So I wrote a couple of books. You know, this is when PCs were just coming in, and we had spreadsheets. So I wrote one little book, which is marketing analysis for Lotus 1, 2, 3, and then another one, the marketing management with spreadsheets. But it was really Mickey Mouse stuff. I didn't really know how to turn the more sophisticated models into something that would be usable. But I know somebody who could, and that was Arvin. And so I went after Arvin like a football recruiter, which I learned about here. And I said, you gotta come to Penn State. We gotta work on trying to translate all this stuff we've been putting in the journals and turn that into some tools that we can use. So when we reach the limit of our ability, then comes Arno. You know, how did we get together? You know, this again is sort of serendipity. And I have to say that after about 25 years of working together with Arvin and Arno, we've had no major disagreements. I don't know how many marriages can say the same thing. Anyway, my going into marketing, working as an academic in a business school, working in B2B, marketing analytics, all came together not by careful planning, but basically by serendipity, by seeing opportunities that, in retrospect, seem right in front of you, but somehow or other folks may have missed that. I've gone on too long, but I want to just share maybe just a few things about some lessons that I've taken away just from reflecting on my career. First of all, number one, give credit to others. Think about what Phil Copper did, okay? Simply by switching the order of names. That did so much for me in my career. It was not that much to do. I've never understood why so many of my colleagues seem reluctant to give credit for their ideas and accomplishments. And certainly there's nothing that I've ever done that I can claim complete credit for. Most of my ideas have been adaptations of things that are already out there. So why not share the credit? If you share the credit, it multiplies. You know, it doesn't diminish what you've done. So as I say, share the credit. Second is pay forward. When this profession works well, senior scholars mentor junior scholars and doctoral students, if you will. And you know, those mentors, we have a lot of folks here who are in that category, have an urge to pay back. And they want to pay back. Now, direct paying back in our profession, as far as I'm concerned, is like having your kids pick up the bill for dinner. It doesn't work all that well, at least in my eyes. It doesn't feel right. So my idea is that why not pay forward? If a mentor does something for you, the way to pay back is to mimic that behavior for the folks that you can mentor. Third, is be grateful. It's often been said that academics care so much about the work because the stakes are so low. Every time I get peeved about something professional or think about myself as overworked, I have to remind myself, I get paid to do this. I've got almost complete control over my time, my calendar. I've got job security matched only by the clergy. Every day when I wake up, imagine you talk to somebody in industry, you say, well, I'm going to lose my job, okay? Well, guess what? Okay, you're going to be out there in 2 weeks. No, I'll be out here in a year and a half. Who gives you a year? There's no other profession that they're going to fire you if they give you a year and a half notice. In any case, every day when I wake up, I remind myself to be grateful that the day is a precious gift and it's not an entitlement, that I am alive this day and free to do pretty much what I choose. So there's much to be grateful for, not the least of which, frankly, are all of you here, all of you colleagues who've taken the time to share this evening with me. And fourth, try to be a mensch. Ralph mentioned the term mensch. It's a Yiddish word, it roughly translates as a good person. A mensch just does the right things. A mensch is what you want your kid to become. And it's also, when you pass on, you hope that people will say, he or she was a mensch. And one of the things that a mensch does is say thank you. Another thing that a mensch does is get off the stage. But one of the things that a mensch does is to say thank you. And there are just too many people here for me to say thank you. I can go from table to table. They're my colleagues here. They're my colleagues, co-authors. You folks are when I see all of you here, all these memories come back. I've got my family here. I've got Lori and the staff. There are so many people here, and I know that some of you thank me, and I just thank you for the connections that I've had for all of you here. And I certainly thank Penn State for putting up with me for all these times. I know that there was, Chuck, thank you for those comments, and I know they're real. So right now, I guess I feel pretty much like what Lou Gehrig must have felt. Like Lou Gehrig, great baseball player, when he gave his farewell speech at Yankee Stadium on July 4th, 1939. Lou ended his speech by saying, "Today I consider myself to be the luckiest man on the face of the earth." That's how I